Okay.
Get them out of range.
Right. Ready?
Okay, let's do it
Okay.
quick.
I'm Amy Haugland.
And I'm Alex Haugland.
And this is our 1954 Lancia Aurelia B20 GT.
Welcome to Everyday to Exotic.
Just a little too long now.
There's over 200 cars in the Haugland collection.
And it just keeps growing.
Our goal is to try and drive them all.
Each episode, we'll talk about the car's history, showcase its design and features, and dive into its mechanicals.
Then we'll take it out on a drive through the beautiful roads of Oregon.
Finally, we'll rate our car to see where it stands in the Haugland rank.
In this episode,
We're confused about ambiguous emblems.
Is it a sword? Is it an anchor? What is that?
we describe rear ends.
It is beautiful backside.
This car has a nice butt.
And Alex describes his occasional maintenance routine.
Sometimes hitting it is the right answer.
It's very true.
All this and more on today's episode of Everyday to Exotic.
But first, let's take a look into the Lancia Aurelia's history.
Lancia Fabbrica Automobili was founded in 1906 in Turin, Italy by Fiat racing drivers Vincenzo Lancia and Claudio Fogolin. Thus, Lancia's entry into building some of the most innovative and forward-thinking cars began. In 1913, the Lancia Theta was the first European car with a complete electrical system. In 1922, the Lancia Lambda became the first unibody car, which is now the standard of almost all car production worldwide.
In 1937, when Vincenzo died of a heart attack, his wife, Adele Lancia, and son, Gianni Lancia, took over the company and hired Vittorio Giano from Alfa Romeo as the company's lead engineer. Bringing in his expertise from Alfa Romeo, Giano continued the technological advancements that Lancia led the world in, with the Lancia Ardea receiving the first 5-speed transmission in a production car, and then in 1950, introducing the revolutionary Lancia Aurelia.
The Lancia Aurelia perhaps represents the pinnacle of Lancia's engineering design collected into a single vehicle. It featured the world's first production V6 engine designed by Francesco de Virgilio. It also was one of the first front-engined rear-wheel drive cars to feature a rear transaxle, improving weight balance and performance. The car also featured 4-wheel independent suspension with inboard rear drum brakes to reduce unsprung mass.
The end result was a comfortable, capable car, technologically well ahead of the majority of other manufacturers worldwide. The Aurelia, as was typical of Italian cars at the time, was produced in a range of body styles, with the Lancia-designed B12 four-door sedan as the base model, the B20 GT, designed by Ghia and built by Pininfarina as a 2-door fastback coupe, the B24 convertible Spider by Pininfarina, and the B50 and B52 series, which were bodied by a number of different carrozzerie with a range of custom bodies in small numbers.
Often considered the first true grand touring car, the Aurelia B20 GT proved to be a particular favorite amongst racers, with one placing second in the Mille Miglia as well as 12th overall in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, both in 1951. Aurelias went on to take the first 3 places in the 1952 Targa Florio, as well as first in the Liège-Rome-Liège race in 1953. These wins all culminated in the top podium spot in the 1954 Monte Carlo Rally, making Lancia's first of many successful rally wins over the next few decades.
Over the course of production, the Aurelia B20 GT continued to evolve, ending with 6 different series of cars, with various changes and power upgrades, moving from a 2-liter engine to a 2.5-liter for the 3rd series, and then to a De Dion rear suspension from a semi-trailing arm setup in the 4th series. With the car becoming less competitive in racing, and with the overall engineering reasonably refined, the 5th and 6th series focused on increasing the luxurious features of the car.
Our car is a 1954 Lancia Aurelia B20 GT and is a Series 4 example. Like the majority of Series 4 cars and all the Lancias before it, it is a right-hand drive car, with left-hand drive only becoming an option late in the Series 4 production. This car has been fitted for most or all of its life with several period performance modifications produced by Enrico Nardi, who started his career working for Lancia. These features include a floor shifter replacing the column shift, twin carburetors, a hood scoop, as well as a Nardi steering wheel. It is suspected that this car was raced in period, but we unfortunately have no early history of the car before its restoration in the Netherlands several years ago. So to start with, I probably should freely admit that I am somewhat biased towards this car. This has been a car that I have absolutely wanted for years before I actually turned it up. And Lancia is probably my single favorite company of Italian car designers. In a lot of ways, they epitomize what I love about automobiles. They were a company of engineers building the best possible car they could, irrespective of the final price, irrespective of anything else. It's the let's be as innovative, let's be as creative, let's build an absolutely amazing car. And if it doesn't sell well because it's too expensive, because it costs too much to make, we'll see what we can do to survive. And that's kind of the history of Lancia for the most part, as they led up post-war into the 1960s, when sadly in 1969, I believe, they were eventually bought by Fiat rather than go bankrupt.
That's what happens when you say that's future Lancia's problem.
Yeah. That said, let's get into this car. It's gorgeous.
It is stunning. It is beautiful. The styling is so gorgeous. I love Italian styling. I just do. For its elegance, for its, understatedness, and yet it's like the car comes up to you and says, ciao. It's very cool.
So this is really sort of iconic of Italian car design coming out of the late 40s and into the early 1950s. And that really revolutionized car design in general. Pininfarina with the Italia had done one of the first cars with sort of an integrated fender and hood setup, with the bonnet basically in the middle here, and the fenders in the front end all being sort of one unit. And it was one of the first cars that had a line for the hood that was below the line of the lights coming into it. This kind of carries that forward. That fastback shape on the back is something that you started seeing in Italian cars in that era as well. You see it in the Maserati A6, you see it in, again, some of the Italia and things like that. It really fits in that aesthetic of Italian car design at that point.
So here in the front, I want to talk about some of the emblems that are displayed here. First of all, the Lancia emblem. Lancia means spear. It is the last name of the family, but they also incorporated it into their badge. So it's a flag that says Lancia, and then it's attached to a spear, held up really high. They're very proud of themselves. Another emblem up here is the Carello emblem. All of these lights are by Carello, and they have their little sort of swordy thing here, which is pretty cool.
Is it a sword? Is it an anchor? What is that?
I don't know
what it is.
It's an emblem.
Cool. It's an emblem.
It's open to interpretation.
Yes.
If you know, leave us a comment.
Yes.
I do really, really like the arrangement of the lights up here. I love those big, hefty rings around the headlights. These are fog lights here.
Yep.
On both sides. And then these are position lights. And I absolutely love the design of these, that sort of bullet shape. And then they look fluted. And I realize that that's practical, that's for light disbursement, but it looks really cool and fancy.
So looking at just the general shape of the car, we still have sort of that pre-war styling in a very upright grille with a shield shape. We have air intakes on the sides here too, letting a bit more air come in underneath the car and things as well. I love the way that the bumper is cut out just in the right shape in order to basically sit there around the grille and sort of frame it down below. The license plate here is actually a British license plate. This car did spend some time in England under previous ownership, and it's now a part of the history of the car. Since I don't need to put a different front plate on, I'm leaving this one here as part of that history.
I will say that one of the things that I love about our collection is that we do keep things like the British license plate and things like that. It's a visual reminder of the car's adventures.
One thing that you'll see that's not necessarily standard on all Lancia B20 GTs is the hood scoop here. And that is there because of the Nardi speed kit that's in here with the twin carburetors and its own little sort of air intake that sits on top of them, sits right below that. So it allows fresh cold air to come in right into the carburetors for the engine itself. That was part of the Nardi speed equipment that's on this. So one of the things that I love about Italian cars this time period, unlike a lot of American cars, is they're very clean lines, very simple in style, but still very beautiful. They flow very nicely, but they don't have massive amounts of things jutting out of them randomly. You don't have like giant bullet forms and like jet engines and fins sticking off the back and everything else. It really is a pretty clean, simple shape. And that lends itself to the elegance of the car itself. I mean, as we come back, you really don't have much going on. A little bit of chrome trim at the bottom. You've got chrome hubcaps and things. We've got a nice mirror attached here, which is basically an aftermarket thing so that you have a mirror. All of the trim around the windows here and all of that is aluminum. It's just nice anodized aluminum, chrome door handle, nice push button doors, no frame on the glass, so very, very clean lines. And then down here, one sort of odd little feature is this, which is a plug for the jack hole. And this is just basically to cover up that hole, keep most of the stuff out of it, and ideally keep it from rusting out, etc.
I think it's interesting in this car that is in the body, as opposed to we have other cars with jack points that it's like a piece of metal that comes down and out underneath.
Yeah, it's just fully integrated in the sill of the car itself. We've got a little quarter window here that opens up from the inside, and on here is part of the history of this car. And in the tradition of Lancia, this car has participated in the California Mille twice. Once under the previous owner, and then once under our ownership. It was a great car to take on a trip like that, putting about 1,200 miles on windy roads through California. So a lot of fun.
So something I find interesting is this trim piece that basically defines the rain gutter all the way forward. A lot of cars don't have that marked out. So it's just nice because it also defines that curve over the windows. It's just pretty as well as functional.
And even though there's no frame on the glass itself, it is kind of replicated stylistically with the trim around the window with these little aluminum inserts. And same thing on the rear window here.
One of my favorite things about this car is the color. The color is called Blue Mediterranean blue. It is a metallic. It is period correct for this model of car. We don't know if this car was originally this color.
May have been.
It may have been. And it was this color when it came to us.
And personally, I love the color.
Oh, same. And how it pops the chrome and shows off the curves of the car, it is absolutely perfect.
So part of the other thing with the styling of this is it looks like a very aerodynamic, sleek car. You have your roofline coming up, but then it slopes down in this fastback, heading back over the trunk and off the tail of the car. So you end up with a very streamlined looking vehicle, and this is really moving into that more aerodynamic styling that really started to define cars mostly in the late 40s coming into the 50s.
So here we are at this car's beautiful backside. We have the license plate lights, and the license plate has a very interesting story. So the American license plate does not fit between these lights. So what we did is we got a replica Italian license plate with OR for Oregon, and then the numbers match our actual historic Oregon license plate down there that we have so it's legal to drive. This way we didn't have to cut up an American license plate, and we didn't have to ruin the aesthetics and the authenticity of the rear of the car.
And there is a frame here, and there's a frame in the shape of the body for that license plate. If we didn't put something there, it also would have looked really strange and bizarre. So this was, for us, one of the better solutions. So one of the other odd things is this follows the typical pattern of Italian license plates. For example, in Milano, you would have your province MI and then your license plate number. In this case, we have OR, which actually does equate to somewhere in Italy. I believe it's on the island of Sardinia. The rest of the number is complete nonsense from an Italian point of view. However, it actually does technically represent a location.
Also back here we have these cute little taillights.
Yeah, tiny little taillights.
I really like them, but they are not big. You have two tailpipes. We also have this really fascinating little light that's underneath the bumper. It's red, it's pretty,
I think it's a rear fog light.
but we don't know for sure. If you do, let us know. We're all learning together.
Carrying forward from the beautiful, shapely backside of this car to the trunk, we actually have an interesting handle mechanism here. You turn one of your side lights here to open up the trunk, which has this fantastically mechanically engineered latch system with a spring and everything. You lift the trunk up, it catches itself. You lift it again, it releases itself. Company of engineers. They did the same thing on the bonnet, on the hood, and absolutely fantastic. I love that, just that little piece of engineering. Tucked in the back, in this little alcove here, these nice little pockets that are great for like sticking all of your like oil or whatever else you need for your tour, we have our jack, which is the original jack, and our jack handle, all tucked sort of back in that corner. And you'd likely also have your tool roll and whatever else you needed sort of tucked in these little compartments, while still leaving most of the trunk open. So the trunk itself is actually really spacious, especially if you didn't actually have to carry a spare tire. The spare tire sits in the trunk because there's no room under the car, because under here is your gas tank. And to access it, you have to open the trunk and open this little hatch to get at the filler.
Again, very secure, not very convenient.
Well, not as convenient, to be honest, but it keeps anyone from siphoning your gas. So from that end, it's a positive thing. Gas is an expensive commodity, especially right after World War II. So otherwise, the trunk's actually pretty big and cavernous. So as far as like wine capacity, you get rid of the spare and there's probably good 6 boxes of wine just across the back half of it. And you might be able to get another like 2 or 3 up front. So I would put this as about 8 boxes of wine without the spare, and probably about 4 or 5 with. So still pretty significant.
So, you know, you can leave the spare at home, and then if something happens, God forbid, you have something to drink while you wait for the tow truck.
Priorities.
Priorities.
Excellent delivery.
Closing the trunk is just as easy as opening it. You just lift, that little catch releases, lowers down. I like twisting the handle so that I'm not forcing the latch, and there we go.
And that's another example of something functional and beautiful. I mean, that latch is right there in that beautiful chrome light.
So moving on to the mechanicals of this car, which is really the thing that makes this thing unique. Open up the hood, we've got a little catch. And then, again, we have that same latching mechanism here in the center, essentially holding the hood up. This really is an unusual engine bay compared to most other cars sort of the time period. And a lot of it has to do with the mechanical differences in this. So coming into this, we see a 2.5 liter V6, the first production V6 engine. This being a Series 4 car, it's a second series with the 2.5 liter, but the first with the Dédion rear end. We've got all sorts of general information here in Italian and French and German and English. So basically, when you open up the hood, you have all the details you theoretically need to go and work on it. We've got our air filter with our twin carburetors underneath it that doesn't really filter much of anything. This is part of the Nardi speed equipment. And our radiator up front here originally had a set of shutters down the front of it that were thermostatically controlled that would open and close basically to allow the air to come in and out of the radiator in order to cool it. So rather than the modern thermostat being a restrictor in the cooling lines, they basically controlled how much air flowed through the radiator to control how much the car cooled and helped the car warm up. The shutters are gone on this at this point. We've got an electric fan on the front. The mechanisms tend to work fairly well, but at the same time, they're not necessarily the easiest to maintain. Other things that we see in here are these 2 reservoirs here, and it's sort of unusual to see these 2 reservoirs. One of them is your brake fluid reservoir. and it says olio freni here, so brake oil. And on the front of it, it has a label that reads, "Attenzione, usare solo olio vegetale per freni." Attention, use only vegetable oil for brakes. That does not mean pour your vegetable oil or your olive oil or whatever into there. It will not work. It actually just means standard .3 brake fluid at this point. But it is one of those things where the translation and things like that potentially could confuse things for people who don't know what the hell they're looking at. The other one, however, is for the suspension. And this has a sliding pillar front suspension system. That's something that Lancia started doing in the 1920s and really stayed on a lot of their cars up until about 1963 was, I think, the last year that they had sliding pillar on any of their cars. Our distributor in the back here is, again, Ignition 123. I know we've talked about them on the channel before. I still have the original distributor that came in the car. This was just a better option to be able to tune the car for touring, for what we actually use it for. And since our main goal with this car is long distance touring, things like the California Melee, it was a good choice. There's a lot of things that are pretty typically Italian in here. We've got horns tucked down in front of the radiator, down low. We have our battery sitting in the back here. We've got a fuel filter here, and with its typical Italian wire-wrapped yellow fuel lines. You see that on Ferraris and other cars of this era. It's actually pretty common. Coils tucked down by the exhaust here. We've got exhaust running down both sides of the car. It's a V6 engine, so why not run 2 exhaust pipes and 2 mufflers? Twin exhaust all the way through. Gives it a nice sound. One of the things, though, however, is moving from the engine towards the back, towards the transmission. It's a rear transaxle. So with the transaxle being in the rear, it's important for the engine to be able to get power to the rear, spinning at the speed of whatever the engine is. So there's a drive shaft running down the entire length of the car that spins at engine RPM speed to that rear transaxle to operate the gearbox itself. That is a fairly intricate piece to try and put together and balance and get to not have vibrations and things like that. This car does have some vibration coming from that drive shaft. We have rebalanced it. It is about as good as we can get it. It's 1950s technology. They improved it as they moved on. They changed the way that the joints were made and how they fit. The weight balance of that works fairly well to keep the car fairly neutrally handling as you go around corners and things. It doesn't want to understeer. It doesn't really want to oversteer. It's actually a pretty well balanced car. The transaxle is in the back. We've got a Dedion rear axle setup, so we have a differential in the center and 2 drive shafts coming off of it, 1 to each wheel, with U-joints basically connecting it, allowing the wheels to basically move independently of each other while still getting drive constantly from the engine itself. Okay, let's move from the front and follow that engine speed driveline to the back. So this car has a 4-speed rear transaxle. Yes, Lancia developed 5 speeds. Unfortunately, this car didn't get one. The suspension on this is independent on the rear, and it's a Dedion suspension. Part of what that means is that the differential is mounted up high, and then it has a pair of drive shafts with U-joints that go out to the wheels. Part of the way that that works, though, is that you really want those drive shafts to be as long as possible in order to get the best angle on the wheels and keep them from rotating too much in a curve as they move up and down. Lancia, being a company of engineers, had a very interesting creative solution to that, and we're going to do something we don't normally do. We're going to disassemble my car. There we go. So the thing that you see here that's really rather unusual is this. This is your U-joint for that drive shaft coming all the way through the wheel, because the longer the drive shaft, the better. Well, if we can make it go through the wheel, it's even longer. So we're going to put it on the outside of the hub and thus end up having as long a drive shaft as possible. Again, a company of engineers building the best damn car they possibly can at a time period when they had more or less free reign to be as creative in the engineering design concepts as possible. And yet another example of something rather unusual. You also won't see a brake behind this wheel because the brakes are inboard, mounted to the side of the differential itself. The advantage of that is that it is unsprung weight. That unsprung weight makes the car handle better, makes it drive better. It makes it more of a pain when you have to do the brakes on the car because you have to take off the drive shaft and do it from that end of things. Otherwise, it gives you a better performing car. And that's what this was all about. Hubcap just snaps right back on onto its nice little rubber retainers here so it doesn't damage anything. Okay. Now, if I could get Amy away from her knitting, we can put her in the interior and she'll take you through that.
So here we are in the interior. This is one of my favorite interiors pretty much ever. I think it's beautiful. And there are a lot of interesting details. First of all, we have this gorgeous two-tone dashboard. It is metal. This part is body color, and then the rest of it is this lovely dark blue that coordinates with the blue leather that's in here. The seats are wool with leather. I really love the design of the seats. The driver's side seat is slightly narrower than the passenger side seat and has bolsters so that you can drive in a spirited fashion. And then the passenger seat is more wide and more bench-like, so you have lots of room to spread out. I just really love things like that. One of the reasons why it's wider is not just for the passenger's comfort, but because you need room for the armrest, which pulls down like that. Which also helps brace your passenger if your passenger is not as excited about you driving spiritedly. And that just folds very elegantly up in there. The seat belts are period-appropriate seat belts. However, this car did not come with them. You could install them later, but during this time period, seat belts were not required. The radio is not original, and I can't guarantee that it's period correct, but it's a touring car, so we have a radio. We have a nice glove box that opens and closes. You know, it's nice. We have knobs. As is traditional in Italian cars, they're not labeled. However, we did some research and we know what they are. So, this one is your interior light. Turns that on. This one is your fog light. Turns those on. This one is your heater. This one is your wipers. And then up here, you have your headlights. Click. Here is your starter switch. This is, I believe, a fan. This little button is your windshield washer. And then down here, we also have another black knob that is your electric fuel pump, because electric fuel pumps are reliable. We have nice big gauges. They are in kilometers. And we have a clock, and it works. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear that tick, 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 tick. The steering wheel is a Nardi steering wheel. This is part of the Nardi performance package. Also says Lancia in the middle. The horn is in the right place. We have this little sort of shiny metal plate on the side of the steering column. That is where the original column shifter would have been. However, this is Nardi, so we have the performance package, which means that our shifter is down here on the floor. On this side, you have a better view of some of the other interesting things in this car. One of which is this lever right here. So I love this. It does two things. You have your turn signals if you push it up and down, and you have your high beams and low beams if you pull it forward and push it back. It's all in one little lever. It is positioned so that it is impossible for me to hit it while I'm steering. It's just great. Another fun thing over here is the ashtray, because of course we have ashtrays because it's the 1950s and we're in Italy. This is just great. It's spring-loaded. And then it's got this little tab here, and you just pull it down, push it back in, and it locks. I love that. It just makes me so happy. In as much as an ashtray can make me happy. The doors open really wide. It's super easy to get in and out of this car. Very, very handy that way. Also over here, you know, you have your door latch handle. You have your pull handle, which is pretty. You have this lovely finished two-tone woolen leather door panel. And then you have the window winder. And the window winder is great. And the reason why the window winder is great is because this part on both sides is hinged. So you can just fold it up and out of the way, which means that you're not constantly smacking your knees or your hands or whatever on it. It's just brilliant. It's this tiny little detail that they didn't have to do. Nobody else does this that I know of. But they decided to do it anyway because it would make the car better and easier to use. That's about it for the interior. So now let's take this car to the exterior of the shop.
This day is gonna be the greatest memory, making history. Let's go. You don't need no luck, that golden touch. Time to light it up. Let's go.
Okay, this is my first time driving this Lancia Aurelia. It's a beautiful car. I have to say, I really love looking over the bonnet on this beautiful, sunny March day. I mean, it's supposed to be a high of 76 degrees Fahrenheit today.
It's also kind of your first time driving a right-hand drive car, so
Yes.
this is really kind of a new one for you.
It definitely takes some getting used to. Our audience will probably notice that I have a big cushion behind my back. And that is because I have short legs, as we all know. So, with the cushion, I can actually reach the clutch pedal and push it all the way to the floor, which makes shifting way, way easier. I will say, even with this big cushion behind my back, which is off our couch, by the way, the seating is very comfortable. I think it'll be even more comfortable when I'm a passenger. I will say I haven't been in here for very long, but already it's like, okay, I get this. The shift pattern is one that I'm used to. Shifting with my left hand isn't that hard. The one thing that is gonna get me a little bit is the turn signal, because you push up for the left turn signal and down for the right turn signal, which is the opposite of what you would do in a left-hand drive car.
Unless it's a BMW who decided for some stupid reason the turn signal had to be on the opposite side of the car, like in 2002.
Yes, that's gonna be fun.
You'll just turn on the wipers all the time, just like I do.
Okay, you know, as long as it's a normal thing. I will say that the pedals on this are stiffer than perhaps I'm used to. Steering is easier than I was expecting. This doesn't have power steering. It has
Big steering wheel.
It has a nice big steering wheel. I like the steering wheel. What? Oh,
Go faster and shift down.
there we go. I'm still over revving a little bit, but I'm getting better.
Should be going about 85, 90 kilometers an hour on this road.
I'll be honest, I haven't really been looking at the speedometer that much. It's kind of like, so I have a Nash Metropolitan. It's a 1955.
1 year newer than this.
1 year newer than this. And I have to say the steering on that is really different from the steering on this. This feels like I'm going a safe speed, whereas the Nash Metropolitan feels like I'm going 100 when I'm going 40. So, I do want to say that this car is very forgiving. I'm in fourth, and I'm going between 60 and 80 kilometers per hour generally, and it's not requiring me to downshift when I slow down from corners and things like that. And I really appreciate that. It's very forgiving. Very nice to a new driver. I am really glad that I'm driving this one after we've done more than 20 episodes, because I'm pretty good at shifting at this point. So it's just adding a new nuance to driving, as opposed to, oh my gosh, now I have to figure out a whole bunch of stuff. Just so y'all know, that's how this works. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is more precise, even if I do keep trying to pull to the right, because the steering wheel feels weird in my hands because it's just cocked to the left. But in any case, I was taught, when I was taught how to drive, to kind of notice where the line in the center of the road hits your car when you're centered in your lane, and try and just keep that line up. At some point, I'll find that perfect balance so that I'm not weaving all over the road, but I'm also, not going too far one way or the other. This is what happens, though, when you get in a car you haven't driven before. Sometimes it takes a little getting used to, a little orientation. And this can happen even when you're in a car that you just haven't driven in a long time. And then for me, I have the extra, this is my first right-hand drive car. I hope all of you get one day to drive a right-hand drive car just so you can see what it's like.
If you don't do it all the time.
If you don't
do it all the time,
that's true.
Hey, you should try driving a left-hand drive car.
Yes, a lot of our audience is from the UK.
And Australia.
And I seem to recall we have a decent Japanese audience too. So, hello to our friends across the pond and across the ocean. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. You get more of this delightful scenery. All right, that's enough YouTube. YouTube talk. That's about all I have to say, I think.
Okay.
Other than, I find this delightful, and I would drive this car again, despite some initial struggles.
Get ready for it. Get ready for it. Yeah, this is it.
So I tend to be a more spirited driver than Amy, partly because I'm far more comfortable driving a right-hand drive car in a drive on the right side of the road world.
Yep.
I mean, overall, this is a really nice car to drive. It is the absolute pinnacle of technology circa 1954. From a modern perspective, it's not a very new car, but it drives actually quite well for the era, especially compared to our other cars from sort of the same era. Steering is light, brakes are good, the steering's very responsive, the car feels fairly nimble. That engine actually has decent power. It's not super fast. It's not a V12 or anything. We're not dealing with it like a Ferrari 250. But it's got actually a fair amount of power for what we're after here. You only have 4 speeds, but 4 speeds is actually enough. I'm going the speed limit right now, and I'm about 2,700 RPM. Suspension is good. It responds reasonably well, especially considering that this is still a sliding pillar suspension. This is fairly old technology in some ways, but very well executed old technology for that. I mean, for a car for the 1950s, my speedometer's rather steady, my tach is rather steady, get a little bit of vibration, but for the most part, they're just reading just exactly where you'd want them to. Most of my British cars of this era, they'd be bouncing all over the place at this point.
You're going on an average of between this much and this much.
Yes. I mean, I do run into things. It's like my water temperature gauge earlier was not reading at all. I tapped it and suddenly it came up to where it should be. Things like that. So it is sort of the nature of old cars.
Hashtag old car things.
Yes. Hashtag percussive maintenance.
Yes.
Sometimes hitting it is the right answer.
It's very true.
Get a little bit of a judder on the brakes, but they do work pretty well. They're drums, so there's a little bit of a limit on how far you really want to take it. I wouldn't want to be racing necessarily on these drums, but they did in period, but they didn't really have anything better. I like the engine sound. Hopefully you guys can hear it. We try. Yeah, the engine sounds great, the exhaust note's great. You get a bit of induction noise with a twin carburetor setup on this. It just makes it feel more sporting than otherwise a lot of people would probably think this car is. I'm glad that this has the floor shift kit. I much prefer a manual transmission with a floor shift. We've got a few cars that have column shifts, but most of them are much more pedestrian, like family sedan type cars.
Like the aforementioned Nash Metropolitan.
Yes. Now getting into some pretty windy sections of road. And so this is where the fact that the steering actually is relatively light is nice. Compared to some of my other cars of kind of the same era, where the steering is actually pretty heavy, this is one of the easiest to steer. I think the only other car that I can think of right now that beats it is probably my Bristol 401, which has remarkably light one-finger steering, even though it's manual steering, and is also about the same age as this. But I like driving this one better, to be honest. Last time I drove this road, I was in the Maserati Bora, which was a wonderful car for these windy roads. This one's not quite as easy to drive just because you don't have the raw power of that engine, but still does pretty well.
I feel like this is still a really good car for some of these Oregon back roads.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mind the curves. In fact, it likes the curves.
So, criticisms, you do get some vibration off this driveline. It is running at engine speed, so when you're turning, especially like 4,000, 5,000 RPM, it shakes the car a bit. And you notice it more at idle. Once it spins up, it self-centers and balances itself out a bit better. But this was pretty new advanced technology at the time. The entire idea that you would spin that shaft running the entire length of the car at like 5,000 RPM, in some ways is sort of a crazy thought. But it meant that the car has much better weight balance than it would with the transmission in the middle. It has a much lower, flatter floor, gives you more room in the front. It means that I don't have a transmission, like right where my left foot is right now. And in most right-hand drive cars, you're going to have a transmission tunnel there, so you actually still sort of get something to rest your foot on. But on this, you just have a very low passage for that drive shaft. And it's very comfortable. The seats are great. They're well sprung. The upholstery is really nice. I don't feel like I'm sliding in it and going around corners. I mean, the fact that the driver's seat is a little bit shaped, basically, is just a really nice touch. Yet it still is sort of the extension of the bench that the passenger seat is.
You could technically cuddle in this car if you didn't mind getting your knee hit by the shifter knob.
Yeah. Maybe that's one advantage, honestly, of a column shift as opposed to a floor shift. Makes it easier to also put 3 people in the front seat if you need to with a large Italian family.
Very true.
Considering my mother came from a family with 6 children, they definitely are not that uncommon in Italy. And I have several relatives who have multiple children on the Italian side. So yeah, this really is a great touring car.
Yes.
Okay, that was one of the most beautiful days that we've had thus far this year, and was a fantastic day to go out and drive this car. So, it's now time for the Haugland Score. Here's how it works.
Alex and I have individually rated the car in 5 categories, each with a rank of 0 to 10. Then we add our scores together to give us the final Haugland score.
After we combine our scores, the results go up on the board. Okay, our first category is performance. And for this car, I ended up giving it a 6. It drives very well. It handles very well. The steering's great. The suspension's great. The brakes could be better, to be honest. And it does stop. It's just the brakes feel heavy. The other thing is, if it had just a little bit more power or a 5th gear, I think it would probably actually be a higher score for performance. It is better than average. It's still a 6, but it is not necessarily on par with, say, a Ferrari 250.
I think I was probably a little bit generous. I gave it a 7.5, but part of that was the steering so precise. I felt like it accelerated enough for me. I probably could have accelerated quite a bit more. So for me, it just felt like it could give more than I was asking of it. So for style, I gave it a 10. I don't feel like I have to justify that.
I gave it a 9, and part of it is I just love the styling and the form of this car. It's really a great example of what Pininfarina was doing in the early 50s, of just gorgeous body lines, gorgeous styling. I mean, technically it wasn't Pininfarina that did the original ones, but they built this.
And there's just something about an Italian car of this era. They just tend to be gorgeous, but this one, in my opinion, is particularly stunning.
Yeah. So for drivability, I gave the car a 7. I could actually potentially daily drive it. Being a right-hand drive car is a little bit of a penalty on our side of the pond here. Basically, the biggest problem with being a right-hand drive car is you really don't have a clear view of passing lanes and things like that. The car is a decent enough performance that I might want to pass someone occasionally. It also creates minor other issues, like if you want to go through a drive-through, or if you have to enter a code in like a gate or to open a gate or something. All of which I've had to do in right-hand drive cars, and all of which is just a pain to deal with.
And I gave it a 6.5 for very similar reasons. I could not daily drive this
without a big pillow.
Without a big pillow. Well, there is that. And then there's also the right-hand drive issue. There's the fact that you can only carry 2 people, really.
Yep.
On the other hand, it has a lot of trunk space. It loves the road. It is a pleasure to drive. And so for like long touring trips. It's a wonderful car for that. So for significance, I gave it a 9. This is a very important car in automotive history. There's a lot of firsts.
Absolutely.
That this car came out with. Also, it's significant for Lancia. It's a very distinctive design. It's one that you look at, and if you know Lancia in particular, you go, that's an Aurelia. You're not going to mistake that for anything else.
And I gave this a 10. I do not give 10s that often, but this is the first production V6. It's one of the first cars that's front engine, rear transaxle. It is a car that broke a lot of ground. It's a car that really sort of defines what a Grand Touring car was from this point forward. And it really is kind of the first modern GT car. It had a lot of success in racing. It had a lot of success in primarily on-the-road long-distance racing, which is really what GT cars excel at. To me, this is really an absolute icon in automotive history. It is a big part of showing, after World War II, what made Lancia great, and in a lot of ways, what built that brand and what that brand really was all about. This car epitomizes all of that.
And also, what a car could be.
Absolutely. And then finally, we have Delight. And this is kind of a hard one for me. I gave the car a 7.5. I love it. I love just about everything about it from the historical perspective, from the style of it. I like driving it. I think other people like seeing it. Sort of the biggest problem to some extent that it has is that it's a Lancia, which at least in the United States, no one has a freaking clue what the heck a Lancia is. And everyone looks at it and sees the right-hand steering column and thinks that, oh, it must be British. Things like that. So it's a car that I think inspires interest, but I don't know that it inspires delight in people who don't know what it is, and not enough people know what this car is. So now that you've watched this episode and know what this car is, be delighted about it, damn it. Okay, so now that I've said that.
I gave it an 8.5.
Okay.
And a lot of that is because after my initial, how does this work? I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with this car. And you may not have noticed this, but when we were swapping cameras around and doing stuff to prepare for part of the drive, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat knitting, every single car that drove by us, every head turned and looked at it, and there were a lot of smiles. And so to me, that ups the delight score.
So, adding all that up, we end up with a remarkable final score of 81. That actually puts this car in third place, just behind the Lamborghini Espada, which I think actually is a very appropriate place for this. If I were to pick between the two as a daily driver, I'd probably pick the Espada. If I were to look at what's a more historically significant car, this wins on kind of every front. Stylistically, it's kind of a toss-up. They're apples and oranges. They're both very amazing cars, like epitomes of Italian design of their eras.
It's true.
But at the same point, how do you compare one to the other? And so I think that actually works really well.
Weirdly, this one was easier for me to drive.
I believe it.
Than the Espada. I loved driving the Espada, and I was so happy that I got to drive the Espada.
But the Espada sings in a way this one doesn't.
It does.
So
and
I understand.
But it's like comparing an elegant House Panther to a roaring tiger.
Yes.
They're both feline, but they have very different attitudes.
Absolutely. So, fantastic. I think that's actually well-deserved, and it really showcases how amazing Lancia is as a car builder at this point.
Good job, Lancia.
So, thank you for watching. I've been wanting to do a Lancia on this channel for a long time, actually since the very beginning, and this is the car I really wanted to start with because of the role it plays. That said, we've got 6, 7 more Lancias in the collection that we can do, including a nice new shiny one that I think a lot of people will be very excited about. So, that said, Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, join us for our next episodes. Go back and watch some of our previous ones. We've done some really cool cars. If you haven't seen it, take a look at whatever we're suggesting here. I wouldn't be surprised if we're pointing you to a nice Lamborghini Espada. Pretty cool car. Very different in a very different way, but also an equally amazing car.
Tell your friends. Enjoy. Have a great time. And until next time, bye.
See ya. Bye.
R.I.P. GoPro. I looked at that. While the rest of us are moving.
Good. Okay. I'm the hell out of here.
It is beautiful backside.
This car has an ass butt.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
it does.